All right, looks like we are live. Guys, excuse my slicked back, greasy looking hair. I just got out of the shower and has not dried and all yet. Speaking of which, going live and just starting. Yesterday we had some issue with the entropy. So I don't see anyone in the chat yet, but we're going to talk about it because it's the beginning of the show. So yesterday we had issue with the entropy. And right now it looks like entropy is running fine, as well as DLive. But you guys said it wasn't in the description or the link that we had or whatever it was. This is it right here. That's me. All right. Excuse me, guys. That's me. All -1. Type it in there. You can follow me over on Entropy. I promise you, I'm there and I am streaming there right now. So if you guys come back to rewatch this, those of you who were telling me yesterday that my Entropy wasn't running or you couldn't find it or it says that stream not found, I don't know what to tell you, but I've experienced this in the past. And of course, right here is me streaming on Entropy. This is all the stuff that is behind the scenes, of course. It says I have 2 views, but that's both me because I'm watching on another screen at the moment. So guys, I'll try to remind folks as they come in, but I am over there if you wish to go over and use Entropy for the question widget. If you wish to use the chat because, well, it's a free speech site and you can say whatever you wish. Or if you wish to donate, which is, of course, appreciated because, you know, I'm having a little baby coming soon and any extra money helps. And we are purposefully limiting employment in our household. I mean, my wife works quite a lot anyways, but we are purposely doing that to focus in and build a life on our household instead of do the regular 9 to 5, like chase after, our tails and basically get more wealth as our cost of living goes up. As we get more wealth, our cost of living goes up with it. That's all just silliness. That's all how the world works. And we're not doing that. So again, if you want to go over to Entropy and donate, it's appreciated. And it really is. It will help us out a lot. And once again, we have a link in the description. So that is enough of that. Let me just close these out real quick. I don't need those. Let me check elsewhere. Let's see, I got 4 streamers in. So guys, the beginning of this was just me ranting about how I do have entropy. Okay. I see. Dalhawk said it's working fine. So there you go. I don't know what to tell you, man. Yesterday you guys said it didn't work. Oh, no worries, bud. Like double house payments, yeah. I mean, dude, if I could do that, that's the way I would be going. You can get off. You can pay, I think, what is it, 2 extra payments a year for your mortgage, just 2. You can get a 30-year loan paid off in 15 years because of the interest you get paid down. So that would be great. Frankly, I'm planning to keep this property as a rental property that I have now and essentially move up later on. Let's see. Also, Val, if you watch this later, I left you a comment in the DLive. I didn't realize you gave me a diamond yesterday. Really appreciate that. I know that I don't know exactly how the DLive currency works, but it is exchangeable for real currency, and crypto's fine by me. Whatever. I will take whatever I can get. Hopefully, when I get done this book, it will sell enough to bring in a decent amount of money for the family. In any case, guys, let's get into business. I've been kind of doing housekeeping here for the last 5 minutes. So I told you, and I named the stream uh, about Carroll Quigley. I told you yesterday we would talk about Carroll Quigley. And I wanted to bring up Carroll Quigley because it talks about basically the influences of the past. And I had been thinking about it, and I actually meant to grab my copy of Tragedy and Hope, because if any of you don't have a copy, you should see it. It's super thick. It's a massive, massive book. But I know a lot of you listen to other folks out there like James Corbett or Jay Dyer, folks who cover this stuff regularly. And you should be listening to those folks. I am not as in depth with those guys because I am more multifaceted, and my focus is a lot more toward the what is classical liberalism, what is the history of this nation, and in how Christian morals build a good ethic for us to have a strong society. Without that, we have a weak society. You know, if I were to sum it up, you can go over to the About section and see what I wrote there, nearly a year ago now. In any case, 2-3 days ago, it might have been 4 days ago now, James Corbett released this video, or re-released it, and I thought that we should watch it because it talks about Carroll Quigley, and I'll be stopping in between, making some commentary, and also we won't watch the whole video. I ripped this so that I could have a pretty good quality, and so I don't have to worry about the interwebs, cycling or any of that kind of stuff, like waiting to upload. But please go over to the Corbett Report and give this video a like. Full credit to the creator. Let's just get started. And guys, I'll be checking up on the chat and stuff while this plays, so let me know if the volume is too low or anything like that.
You're listening to the Corbett Report. CorbettReport.com.
We can do it. 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 I want every person in this hall and every person in this land to reach out and join us in a great new adventure, to chart a bold new future. As a teenager, I heard John Kennedy's summons to citizenship. And then as a student at Georgetown, I heard that call clarified by a professor named Carroll Quigley, who said to us that America was the greatest nation in history because our people had always believed in two things: that tomorrow can be better than today, and that every one of us has a personal moral responsibility to make it so.
Welcome to episode 58 of the Corbett Report. Meet Carroll Quigley. What you have just heard is young William Jefferson Clinton giving his speech at the 1992 Democratic National Convention, in which he accepted the nomination for the Democratic presidential candidacy in the 1992 elections. As we all know, William Clinton went on to win that election and become President of the United States for the next 8 years. It seems very touching, and to the general public probably a point of endearment, that at this, one of the high points of his entire life, Bill Clinton took the time out to thank his university professor, a then obscure historian by the name of Carroll Quigley, quietly toiling away at Georgetown University.
So, just to make a note here that Pete Buttigieg is also a Rhodes Scholar like William Jefferson Clinton. The plans of the Rhodes Scholars, which James gets into, but if you weren't aware, are essentially to bring America, that is North America, into a union, as well as the rest of the English-speaking world, that is the former colonies of the Crown, and to bring them back under the power of the Crown and to form a union the Anglo-Saxon American alliance, as Quigley calls it in his one book. And this is documented by several people. I'll let Corbett get into the details because he did go all the way to make this brilliantly edited and narrated video. So let's let his work shine. But I just wanted to throw in a few things there that in case you guys aren't aware of James Corbett, or you aren't aware of these things. Again, a lot of what I do is to try and educate folks, just let them go down the rabbit holes a little bit, and then hopefully you guys can go start searching out things for yourself.
Basic facts about Carroll Quigley can be garnered from the usual sources, such as Wikipedia, and it can quickly be determined that Carroll Quigley was indeed an historian at the Edmund A. Walsh School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. He wrote lengthy, intimidating historical treatises on an otherwise neglected aspect of modern history. Two of the most important of these treatises was The Anglo-American Establishment, From Rhodes to Cliveden, and Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time. Both of these books are available online, and again, please look in the documentation list for this week's episode to find links to both of those books. While none of this sounds particularly startling or interesting, Carroll Quigley's books, in fact, proved to be bombshells in the historical community, and have been written about, discussed, and debated ever since their publication. To get a sense of what Quigley was writing about, and why it is so controversial and important, I'll read now a short passage from the preface for The Anglo-American Establishment. Quote, "The Rhodes Scholarships, established by the terms of Cecil Rhodes' seventh will, are known to everyone. What is not so widely known is that Rhodes, in 5 previous wills, left his fortune to form a secret society, which was to devote itself to the preservation and expansion of the British Empire. And what does not seem to be known to anyone is that this secret society was created by Rhodes and his principal trustee, Lord Milner, and continues to exist to this day. To be sure, this secret society is not a childish thing like the Ku Klux Klan, and it does not have any secret robes, secret handclasps, or secret passwords. It does not need any of these, since its members know each other intimately. It probably has no oaths of secrecy, nor any formal procedure of initiation. It does, however, exist, and holds secret meetings, over which the senior member present presides. At various times since 1891, these meetings have been presided over by Rhodes, Lord Milner, Lord Selborne, Sir Patrick Duncan, Field Marshal Jan Smuts, Lord Lothian, and Lord Brand. They have been held in all the British dominions, starting in South Africa about 1903, in various places in London, chiefly 175 Piccadilly, at various colleges at Oxford, chiefly All Souls, and at many English country houses, such.
So he goes on here, this is a little bit of the history and the background. The important thing is the All Souls, because the All Souls were a secret society, secret group of special people. It was an honorary thing, and essentially he's going to break this down here in a minute. But you'll find this is what happens. This is a very common pattern. Hey, Matt, what's up? You'll find this is a very common pattern in these kind of secret societies, right, that are colluding to control things. And the Rhodes Society is just one. It is just one element. Obviously, there are others like the Skull and Bones. There's Bohemian Grove, which I don't think is as big of a deal as most people believe it to be. I think it was more of a thing where there were influential people within theater, actors, and whatever else who tend to be historically more towards the open sexual side of things, including, being bisexual or straight up homosexual. So though the Bohemian Grove had a certain reputation, but the point is to get these influential, pretty young thespians to interact with statesmen and to have them influence their policy. Go watch The Aviator, if you would, back in the day. With Leonardo DiCaprio, the movie The Aviator, about Howard Hughes in the way they present Hollywood and the people in Hollywood and how they are going about gallivanting and saying that they are all communists, yet they wouldn't go out and say that necessarily in public. It's a little aspect into Hollywood that most people don't really consider. Now, a lot of that too is because of the big Red Scare during the 1950s and McCarthyism and all of the lies about McCarthyism that the left have told as they have tried to rewrite history. Much like yesterday, as we talked about briefly, because Holly had a question on the switch of the parties, which again was a lie. Hey Josh, appreciate you showing up. So for Matt and Josh, if you didn't catch the beginning of the stream, I was covering nothing other than the fact that my entropy seems to be working, because yesterday people couldn't find it. And it is there. The link is in the description. If you can't find, that link doesn't work for some reason, that's not the link I need to be using, go and type in all-1, because that's where I'm found out at there, and you should find the stream. It is streaming. The doll huck is over there. So if you want to watch there, if you want to talk there in the chat where, free speech exists, or if you wish to donate. And today we're going to cover Carroll Quigley, some stuff from there. Now, I'm not trying to be lazy about this, but frankly, the reality is that it is a little lazy of me, but that I'm not bringing up my own stuff on Quigley. But this is just such a good synopsis within 20 or 30 minutes that James Corbett put together and released the other day. Now, I believe this is older, from an older podcast of his, but this is something that was just re-released the other day. I happened to catch, and I was like, man, I really wanted to talk about Quigley and the Rhodes Scholars, so why not use it? Why not use this? And with that said, go over to Corbett's website or over to his YouTube and give this video a like, because I ripped it, and we have to support creators that are important. So go give him a like, or go watch it, because we're not going to watch the full thing here. We'll watch about the first half, maybe.
Just Tring Park, Blickling Hall, Cliveden, and others. This society has been known at various times as Milner's Kindergarten, as the Round Table Group, as the Rhodes Crowd, as the Times Crowd, as the All Souls Group, and as the Cliveden Set. All of these terms are unsatisfactory for one reason or another, and I have chosen to call it the Milner Group. Those persons who have used the other terms, or heard them used, have not generally been aware that all these various terms referred to the same group. It is not easy for an outsider to write the history of a secret group of this kind, but since no insider is going to do it, an outsider must attempt it. It should be done, for this group is, as I shall show, one of the most important historical facts of the 20th century. Indeed, the group is of such significance that evidence of its existence is not hard to find, if one knows where to look. This evidence I have sought to point out without overly burdening this volume with footnotes and bibliographical references. While such evidence of scholarship are kept at a minimum, I believe I have given the source of every fact which I mention. Some of these facts came to me from sources which I am not permitted to name, and I have mentioned them only where I can produce documentary evidence available to everyone. Nevertheless, it would have been very difficult to write this book if I had not received a certain amount of assistance of a personal nature from persons close to the group. For obvious reasons, I cannot reveal the names of such persons, so I have not made reference to any information derived from them, unless it was information readily available from other sources. End quote. Well, for those who understand their history, what this otherwise mainline professor of history has just stated is rather extraordinary. What he proposes in that preface, and indeed throughout the Anglo-American establishment and Tragedy and Hope, is nothing less than a conspiratorial view of history, the idea that a secret society, founded by Cecil Rhodes, administered by Lord Milner, and continued on well into the 20th century, affected international relations in ways that historians had not hitherto taken into account. It's difficult to put into perspective just how important and how against the grain of traditional historical scholarship Professor Quigley's books were, But an indication of the unorthodox nature of this material can be gained at looking at the secrecy with which he treats his material. Not only does he call the group that he is writing about a secret society, he also openly admits that the inside sources of his information could not be made public.
This is really important, and what Corbett's about to bring up is some actual interviews of Quigley from the 70s before he passed that are him like going on, well, we have to be careful. I can't talk about this. I can't talk about that. I can't talk about this. It sounds very much like a man who is a little bit concerned with exposing things too overtly, or he might pay with his life. Now, again, fantasy or reality, that's up for you to decide. I would err on the side of that there is a harsh reality to that. A very harsh reality that people in our world and our coffers of power, or behind the scenes, the actual people in power, want to make sure their identities are well hidden and only wish to expose themselves at their leisure. So, let's continue.
If all of this seems extremely secretive for a mainline professor of history at Georgetown University, who served as a consultant to the U.S. Department of Defense and the U.S. Navy, then it probably is. But just as a further illustration of this point, let's listen to some highlights of an interview that the extremely reclusive Professor Quigley gave in 1974, in which his insistence on secrecy and discretion might be seen as a little bit odd for an otherwise staid professor of history.
You see, now here's what happened, and I don't know whether we want to get this on tape, but I'll put it on tape. But look, you've got to be discreet. Sure. You know, you have to protect my future. Sure. As well as your own. Sure. All right. And so I better stop talking because, you see, this gets into all kinds of things. Now, and he had got this, and you want to shut that off? A second.
And so the plot thickens. Evidently, there are things about this group and his sources of information that Professor Quigley would not like to, or was not able to, discuss. Again, this is extremely interesting, but let's take a look at what Professor Quigley actually could discuss about this group, which he wrote about. Let's listen to Professor Quigley in his own words from that same interview, discussing this secret society which had such a profound influence on 20th century events.
The group that I'm writing about was originally, in my mind, the group established secretly by Lord Milner in 1908 and 1999 called the Round Table Group, which still publishes a quarterly magazine called The Round Table in London, which is...
So, for those of you who may just be listening to audio, I know this is an old recording from 1974, so I will try to enunciate this a little bit better just in case you couldn't hear, and let me know, guys, in the chat if you have a chance, and that way I don't have to do this. But I want to make sure you hear what he's saying. Mr. Quigley says, the group that I am writing about was originally, in my mind, the group established secretly by Lord Milner in 1908-1909 called the Round Table Group, which still published a quarterly magazine called The Round Table in London, which is one of the world's best sources of international relations information since 1910. The first editor of it was Lord Lothian, at the time, Philip Carr. Now, regardless of these names, what you need to understand is that this magazine that was published, the Round Table Group, is the grandfather or great-grandfather, if you would, of groups such as the Trilateral Commission and the Council of Foreign Relations here in the United States. They are directly related and directly linked. So understand that these people are setting forth the policies that our Congress and Senate and our presidents follow and have followed very, very strictly since the aftermath of World War II, which is why we were in Korea and did other things that were not American.
One of the world's best sources of international relations information since 1910. The first editor of it was Lord Lothian, at that time Philip Kerr, K-E-R-R, and nobody knew this really for years. I got to know things, and I investigated that group, you see? Now, how I found it is very interesting. I noticed that prominent people in English life had Fellow of All Souls College, Lord Halifax, who was the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, and then they made him ambassador to America. When they take the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs and makes him ambassador to Washington, which most people would consider a downward step, it shows how important they could.
Now here I need to make an important point that they don't talk about. He's talking about going to Washington and a state of foreign affairs and to make him an ambassador to Washington, which most people would consider a downward step. It shows how important they consider Washington's support would be in World War II, you see. And he says, all right, he's a Fellow of All Souls. Now, the All Souls he'll get into, but what you need to understand, too, is the key of Washington, D.C. And again, I told you I would expound on this a little bit. And again, you guys, it's incumbent upon you to go research what I have to say, to come back at me and say, Bill, you're wrong about this or that or whatever else. I'm not telling you what to think. I am simply giving you a little bit of bread so you can subsist and go find out for yourself. I'm leaving you a trail of crumbs, if you would. So in Washington, D.C., there is this really, really affluent part of D.C. that's really secluded all by itself called Georgetown. And there is a university there that is Jesuit run. And many of these ideas are run through Georgetown and the Jesuits. Now, if you aren't aware, the current Pope is a Jesuit. He is from the Jesuit order, and the Jesuit order is of the military arm of the Catholic Church. They have their own Pope, a black Pope. That is the leader of the Jesuit order. And they are the ones who implemented the Inquisition and all these other things in the past. Regardless, they are part of building this society of a one world government, and they are focused on getting the Protestant church back into the Catholic Church. That is their sole goal and mission. And again, I'm talking about Georgetown University specifically because this is where Quigley taught, by the way, folks. But a lot of influence runs through there, through the Jesuits, through the Rhodes Society, and other agencies as well. The CIA and FBI and whomever else in the State Department have a lot of influence within Georgetown, and you have to understand these outside influences that are basically dictating policy to our young leaders as they come up. As our young leaders, as their minds are being formed, they're being told, oh, I like this, I like that. Now, I believe this video gets a little bit into how they pick these people. It's essentially much like Brother Augustine talked about on the channel, on my other channel, All Minus One, the Ends Justify the Memes. What channel am I doing today? I don't know. But over on the Ends Justify the Memes, we talked about this with Brother Augustine a little bit, that in Masonry, they do the same thing. A lot of the times you'll just go through the motions. You don't know anything. But if you're the right type of person, they'll say, hey, these are the actual secrets to what's going on. Now, you might say, Bill, how can you prove any of this or any of that? Well, when you start comparing their writings and when we see the whistleblowers or the people that are just open about what they have to say, they're all congruent. And these things are congruent throughout time and over the last few centuries. So let's see. Shelley said that they had to be reined in by the church now and are noted to be scientists and technical scholars. I'm assuming, Shelley, you're talking about the Jesuits, and Matt saying worldly power. Yes, absolutely, guys. So I'm going to hit play.
Says Washington's support would be in World War II, you see. All right, he's a fellow of all souls. The fellow who summoned Neville Chamberlain in the 10th of May, 1940, and said, for God's sake, go, was Leo Amory. All right, he was a sidekick, the chief lieutenant, political lieutenant of Lord Milner. You see, he was a fellow of all souls. And so I decided I would study All Souls. This is purely historical. I got the names of all people who had been Fellows of All Souls since 1899 to whenever I was doing it, which would be about 1947. And there were 149 of them. I discovered most of them were fellows for only 7 years, which is the regular appointment. It's 7 years. But some of them were for 55 years, Fellows of All Souls. A man named Dougal Malcolm, who was...
So let me read some of this stuff, because, again, I know the audio is a little bad. He's saying it about different people of All Souls, and he says there were 149 of them. I discovered that most of them were fellows for only 7 years. That is the average. Most people were given this appointment. These would be the uninitiated. These would be the people who are the cover of the group. They are put in out front and saying, oh yeah, this is just part of a fraternity. It's an honorary thing for 7 years, and then they move on. But then there are other people. There are other people which subsided in this society for much longer, which was the regular appointment, which is for 7 years. That, again, he just talked about it. I'm quoting here. He says, but some of them were for 55 years, Fellows of All Souls. And he says, a man named Dougal Malcolm, who was the head of the British South African Company, which is what Rhodesia, you see, and he was 55 years. So Rhodesia and the South African Company, the British South African Company, folks, is all Cecil B. Rhodes. This is how he made his fortune through diamonds and golds and mines and whatever else that he controlled. And he took all of his wealth. He was probably the wealthiest man ever to live, supposedly, from this wealth. Hard to say, because I believe J.D. Rockefeller was quite rich as well. Back in those days, it was easy to be insanely wealthy, more so than the billionaires that we have today. Speaking of which, guys, if you hadn't heard, I guess Bill Gates is getting a divorce. We'll talk about that a little bit more over in the Ends Justify the Memes, but that's interesting. In any case, let's keep moving.
The head of the British South Africa Company, which is what Rhodesia, you see. And he was for 55 years. I discovered that Lord Brand, who had been with Miller in South Africa, was for years, and he was the head of Lazar Brothers Bankers in London. And I discovered that Leo Amory was for years, and so forth. And above all, I discovered a man named Lionel Curtis who had no right whatever to be a fellow of All Souls. You get to be a fellow of All Souls either because you are a very prominent person, and as an honorary thing you will become an honorary fellow for 7 years, or because you are an outstanding...
So you're saying a lot of these people had no right to be in All Souls. Either you are a very prominent person, or as an honorary thing, you will become an honorary fellow for 7 years, or because you were an outstanding scholar and you get it by competitive examination when you graduate. That's how Lord Halifax got it.
Scholar, and you get it by competitive examination when you graduate. That's how Lord Halifax got it. His name was Charles Wood. In 1903, when he graduated from Oxford, he took a competitive examination.
So I'm going to skip some of this, guys. It says, now discovered he kept it because he went immediately to South Africa and met the kindergarten, that is the group that they would call the young men who were part of this group, the kindergarten, which was the group of people that were running South Africa for Lord Milner. They were called the kindergarten because they were all young kids. And then Quigley says, you see, now these are the ones who remained forever after Fellows of All Souls. Or in Lionel Curtis's case, he's the man who said, we've got to change the name from British Empire to Commonwealth of Nations. That's interesting, especially if you look at things like how the UN talks about nations. And the reason is they had been students of Alfred Zimmern, who wrote a book in 1909 called The Greek Commonwealth, describing ancient Greece, you see, and who was the man who made Arnold Toynbee a great classic scholar, do you see, and brought him into international affairs. Nell knew none of these. All I knew is that here were here was a fellow, Lionel Curtis, who was such a poor student, it took him 15 years to get his degree. And then he got it with about the lowest passing degree or something like that you could ever get. And nobody knew it. Nobody ever heard of him. So what he's saying is this guy should have never been a fellow. I don't understand why he was a fellow. He was in college for 15 years before he even got a degree. So before I keep going, guys, real quick, if you all like this, please give me a like. I am going to get most of my likes while you view. So if you guys like me, like, share, subscribe, you know, the thing. Do that, guys. It helps me grow. It helps other people get in here, aside from my other strategy, which is to to make friends with people and grow audience that way. But very helpful. And I just need to remind you all, because, you know, sometimes you forget. Also, you can go over to Entropy and donate, or the subscribe star, but you don't have to, of course. That is working now. Some people were saying they were having trouble with it. I think Matt said he had to go into Firefox. I can't tell you why, guys. I'm not a tech guy. Val said she had to hit play, but it works otherwise, so that is good. All right, let's keep moving. So, make sure I didn't miss a slide here. Nope. Quigley says, furthermore, he was Lord Halifax's roommate at All Souls for years, and then I discovered this fellow is behind everything that's going on. Lionel Curtis, do you see? Now I don't think we should talk too much about this. Let's not talk too much about this discovery that I made, because we might both die. And Carroll Quigley was found dead not much long later. A few years later. I'm not saying that it is related. I'm just saying that it happened. You see, all right, but having discovered that, I met Alfred Zimmern when he came here to give a speech. And I said, isn't this funny that the All Souls, he said, that's the Roundtable group. I had never heard of them. That shows how little I knew. And they'd been around since 1909 and publishing this magazine from 1910, and this was 1947. And I said, what is the Roundtable Group? He named them, who they were. He said, I was a member of them for 10 years, from 1913, and they added, they brought me in, invited me, because I was in their Works Educational Alliance. This is extensive programs, night courses, summer courses from Workers Educational Alliance. And he said that is what they brought me into it. I was for 10 years. Guys, I'm reading a quote, so this is a quote directly from speaking, so it may not be completely intelligible. And he said, I resigned in 1923 because they were determined to build up Germany against France, he said. I wouldn't stand for it, so I resigned. I'll let Quigley speak those words.
Night courses, summer courses for Workers Educational Alliance. And he said, that's why they brought me into it, and I was for 10 years, and he says, I resigned in 1923 because they were determined to build up Germany against France. He says, I wouldn't stand for it, so I resigned. Now, when I met Lord Brand later and asked him about this, he had never seen a letter of resignation. Now, and so I better stop talking, because, you see, this gets into all kinds of things. Now, this...
I'm going to stop talking because there's all kinds of things. So he's talking about them building up Germany, obviously the war effort, all that stuff. And we know that people like the Bushes, for instance, back in the day, Prescott Bush had ties to that. We know that there are ties to Aleister Crowley, Bohemian Grove, and the Bushes. This is no different. All of these groups are powerful groups. This is how they operate. You know, I'm not sitting here to pretend like I have all of the answers or know exactly who's in charge, but this is just the reality of things, guys. And this is eminently clear. It has been eminently clear for a long time if you know what to look for, what to listen to. If you don't believe this stuff, it's probably because you have a normalcy bias. You have this bias that says, oh no, the world doesn't operate this way. It can't be like this. You have your head in the sand, guys. Most of you are here because you do understand something of this. You understand that there are forces outside of what are the mainstream visible political forces dictating your life. And I'm echoing. Let's do the little fix here. Better? Is the echo gone? Let me hear my own audio real quick. Let's do the little fix here. Better? Is the echo gone? Sounds like it's gone to me. Thanks for letting me know, man. Like I said, I might need to replace this cable. Hopefully I don't have to replace my mic because these things are expensive. In any case, let me get that adjusted well too, so it won't be directly on my chest. Yeah, thanks again, Matt. What was I saying here? Oh, I was talking about the influence of these people behind the scenes on the world, right? I could show you study after study basically explaining that special interests rule the day. But it's beyond the special interest, folks. We are, I don't speak of fascism in the United States like the left does. It's a much more subtle thing than what they're talking about. They think that all fascism is exactly like that. In fact, the fascistic system that is here in the United States has been here for a very long time, but it's oscillated in power and in strength and in influence. Generally speaking, when the left gets into power, we become more fascistic. Now, we saw a little bit of a switch of that a little bit here in the last 20 years with, old GW. But GW being in, he wasn't really a traditional conservative. Now, was he? He was a neocon, and he was part of this stuff, this very thing I'm talking about. Just one of those gym playground plastic tubes. Yeah. It's a minor thing with my mic, guys. I apologize for that, but I've had this mic for 4 years now, or more maybe, and it's finally got some good usages to it. And could just be this cable, because I do tend to plug and unplug my equipment. Because the reality is that the NSA and many other agencies you've never heard of can tap into it at any time that they want. So I don't need them listening to me having conversations or sex or whatever else with my wife in my bedroom. Not something that needs to happen. So that tends to, of course, rub the connection down and make things looser and whatever else, instead of just leaving it in there 24/7. I suppose I could turn my computer off, but I don't know. I don't know. Then again, I guess the NSA, they watch me, do everything here on my phone too. So in any case, let's keep going, guys.
I knew the Round Table Group was very influential. I knew that they were the real founders.
Yes, GW was in Skull and Bones. That's right, Salmon. Hello. Thanks for showing up. GW was in Skull and Bones. But again, this is just one group. I'll bring up some Skull and Bones stuff and some of these other groups later on. One group. Most of these groups are actually tied together. They're loosely affiliated. Obviously, they are part of bigger organizations together. Like all of these folks all go to, like the Bilderbergs. They all are part of the World Economic Forum. They're all pro-UN. So there's nothing really crazy here. But let me read this quote from Quigley real quick. It says, "Now this, I knew the Round Table Group was very influential. I knew that they were real founders of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. I knew that all the stuff that is in print, that they were the real founders of the Institute of Pacific Relations. I knew that they were the godfathers of the Council of Foreign Relations here. And part of that, too, is with the Rockefeller family. And again, those are different ties. So we're talking about very specifically the Rhodes Society. The Rockefellers did various things as well. Hopefully, in the future, I will talk about some stuff like what Scarlett Iserby discovered. Again, guys, this stuff is old information, but it's relevant today. And as more and more people wake up, they don't know these routes. And as folks like... I'm not really a huge fan of Alex Jones per se. I much rather listen to someone like Jay Dyer or James Corbett, or back in the day, I used to listen to Bill Cooper. Alex Jones is more of an entertainer, and he says a lot of really stupid stuff that is to appeal to emotions. Now, essentially what he does is what the left does. He just does it on the right and talks some truth. Sometimes Alex Jones says really crazy stuff, though. I'm more in the realm of what is legitimate and what's not. There are certain quotes out there that get repeated over and over and over again about, these conspiracy theories, and they're not real quotes. So, like I said, people like Jay Dyer or James Corbett, I'm a fan of because they take it a little bit more seriously. I'm not even saying that I have all the answers, but this is a reality in our world, and these people dictate the policy. These people are the rulers. Why wouldn't we listen to who is actually running the nation and pushing the policies? Why wouldn't we listen to these people? These are the true leaders, folks. Those people you elect, no, they're not leaders. Those people were puppets 90% of the time, not all of them. I'm not saying your local congressman is a puppet, guys, but if they're on the MSNs, if they're on CNN, if they're on Fox News, if they're regular correspondents, they're most likely a puppet. And interestingly, too, they do things. We saw, like, the deep state does things to get people in line, like Matt Gaetz. Notice how that story's kind of disappeared. No, I think Matt Gaetz might have been, likely, probably was, set up. Why not? He's a decent-looking young single man. Why, who's rich and affluent. Why wouldn't you date a bunch of women? I mean, Republican or Democrat. Guys, I know how D.C. is. Like, everybody is banging everybody. I can tell you that right now. I've been around. I mean, my wife and I were like, from first date, we were like this. But, I've been around these younger folks in D.C. working in these orgs and whatever else. And, the girls in the room. And immediately, it's like you feel like, walking in like they didn't know I was married or didn't see the wedding ring or maybe didn't really care. Or my wife wasn't around or whatever. And the girls just get really super, who is this? Who's this guy? Get really super friendly really quick. Not something I'm used to, having grown up in smaller town areas. But I do know from my dating history that, used to go down toward DC a lot because it's a little bit more easy. So guys, just checking on the chat real quick. Let's keep going here.
The Royal Institute of International Affairs, and I knew they were all the stuff that's in print, that they were the real founders of the Institute of Pacific Relations. I knew that they were the godfathers of the Council on Foreign Relations here. Mm-hmm. I knew that, for example, the big study of history, many volumes of Arnold Toynbee. Mm-hmm. All right, I knew the manuscripts of that were stored in the Council on Foreign Relations during the war so they wouldn't be destroyed by German bombs.
So right here, what does he say? The study of history, many volumes of Arnold Toynbee. He says, I knew of manuscripts that were stored in the Council of Foreign Relations during the war so they wouldn't be destroyed by German bombing. Do you see? Do you see? Do you see? Sorry. He does say that a lot, so.
And so forth. And so forth. So I began to put these things together and discovered that this group was working for the following things. They were a secret group. They were working to federate the English-speaking world, the English-speaking world. They were closely linked to international bankers.
Yeah. So I began to put these things together. and discovered that this group was working for the following things. They were a secret group. They were working to federate the English-speaking world. They were closely linked to international bankers. They were working to establish a world, what I call a three-world power. Now, interestingly, he's going to break this down into three sections of the world. I think they want to divide it up. In fact, they already have. The International Monetary Fund, as well as the World Bank and the UN, have divided the world into 10 sections. And that echoes a thing that happens in the Bible as well. And also, like I said, if you go back, that's what William Cooper believed. Someone who has some influence or some pointed me in the right direction some years ago. Of course, he's no longer with us. But he's going to get into this three-part world, which is sort of true, sort of important as far as regions go. But I want to posit an idea here that the three-part world is a three-tier system, something like the elite class or the guardians, the middle class or the protectors, that is the police and the military, and then the servant slave class, which is everybody else, because that's essentially Plato's Republic. And that's really, in the end, what all of these things are about. It's always what they are going to be trying to implement. There are the people who know best. They are the God Kings. They are the wise philosophers. They are the ones who get to dictate to you how you live your life. Then there are the people who listen to them, the muscle, the enforcers. And then there's everybody else who are the sheeple, the debt slaves, the ones who prop up the system by essentially providing all of the material resources and goods for everyone else. This isn't like a Marxian idea, guys. I'm not trying to talk about, the bourgeois versus the proletariat or any of that kind of stuff. But class struggle is real. It's one of the few things that Marx, I would say, got right. Obviously, class struggle is real. In fact, most of the struggles that we talk about in the United States that we make racial or whatever, I'd say are more class dependent, because you're not finding this issue amongst certain racial groups who are wealthy, generally speaking. And a lot of this, too, is just the breakdown of the family. That's all done on purpose. We get rid of the fathers, we get them out of the homes, and we create this feminized society that basically needs the father to be the government. Again, the guardians. Think of that terminology. Plato wrote that over 2,000 years ago, and that idea has burned with humanity ever since. And was probably around before Plato.
They were working to establish a world, what I call a three-power world. And that three-power world was the Atlantic bloc of England and the Commonwealth and the United States, Germany, Hitler's Germany, Soviet Russia.
Now, Soviet Russia, not a thing, guys. Not today. If you believe that, I don't know what to tell you. Go look at their GDP. Go look at other European nations. Go look at the United States GDP. Russia's still trying to figure a lot of stuff out. They're doing all right. One of the good things with them, for their people, is they have a lot of natural resources. But I think China is the greater individual state that we need to be thinking about here. Again, these are old plans, so things change, right? Things will always change. The Hitler's Germany thing is interesting because think about the EU, right? The European Union is basically based out of Germany, is it not? Germany was probably the most influential nation state in Western Europe outside of England. We could talk about France, but I would argue that the French influence in the world was more the Germanic side of the Franks than the Frankish, but but that's a whole nother thing we can talk about. Maybe some English friends sometime can have a discussion about that, because I know how much you gentlemen over there love the French. But Germany was always highly influential. The philosophy and psychology, the intellectual work in Germany, the engineering, all of that, highly influential. And they have ties, of course, ancient ties to the Slavic people as well. Some of those kind of groups overlap a little bit, which is why Hitler and Stalin originally were making an alliance. Hitler thought, though, the Slavic people were a lesser race and needed to be enslaved, which is why he broke that treaty eventually. But obviously Hitler was a little overzealous, was he not? But again, I don't want you to focus too much on the specific names here, but understand that these general areas are important. Understand that we're not talking about South America or Africa either. Again, as far as I'm concerned, the globalists want those areas depopulated. They really do. They always focus on the industrialized developed nations, and they really focus on urbanization. Interesting fact, if you guys didn't know, I was reading I was writing stuff for my book, for this novel I'm writing, and of course, there's research to be done, and I want this to be a well thought out book. I don't want to just write some just nonsensical pop novel. I want there to be meaning behind what I'm writing here. And so with that, I also want there to be some factually accurate things. And I was looking up localities of people where they live and the density of them in the United States. You know that 80% of folks that live in the U.S. live on 3% of the land. 3% holds 80% of the population. That's crazy. And that other 97% of the land in the United States only has 19.7% of the people. Most of you don't actually live in rural areas. Like I live in a rural area-ish, but I live in the suburbs. But I have to go a little bit west or east or south really to get really rural. This where I live would be considered urban or urbanized to some degree. And that's where most people live at all throughout the world. And the UN wants to solidify that. They want to depopulize the southern hemisphere and the lands that are basically that are going to be used for agriculture or farming or just be wildlands, to protect them to save Mother Earth. So keep all those things in mind when you hear these things. Let me read comments here real quick because I see Matt's talking here in the chat. Power without authority. We pretend to abide by the office we created through democratic and republican process. But if something like this is going on, isn't the authority... Isn't this authority this? Denial isn't? How much of it can actually... Denial of authority, how much... Well... Sorry, I'm either misreading that, Matt, or not quite understanding what you're getting at, but I think what you're saying is that these are the people really in power, but they don't actually have any authority behind them. That is from the people. I think that's what you're trying to get at. Look, people, the reality is that people tend to take power. They always have. They either take power or people are reluctant leaders. I prefer reluctant leaders myself. Because I don't want somebody who is power hungry. Every time I've ever met someone who likes power, they're always a jerk. I don't know a single case where I've met a very, very nice, kind, polite person that would give you the shirt off their back who wants power. They just generally don't exist. Now, sometimes those people get power, and those are the kind of people I actually want in power, although sometimes they're also a little bit too soft and too weak. So, let me reread this. So it says, how much of it is actually denial of authority and how much is true naivety and ignorance preventing authority? Again, I'm not quite sure what you're trying to get at, Matt, so you have to clarify that. I'm just going to hit play, though. So,
The free power world.
Now, in that interview, Professor Quigley does not talk about his material as if it were bombshell information, and certainly not as if it was a major revision of all mainline academic history up until that point. But there is no doubt that that's exactly what it was, a major revision of all currently accepted history. To get a better handle on this subject, let's listen to a speech made by the excellent speaker G. Edward Griffin, whom we've featured on previous editions of the Corbett Report podcast. In a speech made in Austin, Texas in April of this year, G. Edward Griffin discussed Carroll Quigley and his unorthodox view of history. The speech...
If you guys don't know G. Edward Griffin, by the way, folks, John Birch Society, you should all know this. There are a ton of great things that G. Edward Griffin did over the years fighting communism. He is really instrumental in the American citizen fight against communism over the years. And he's been doing it since at least, I believe, the 1960s, maybe even the 50s. I believe he's no longer with us. I'm pretty sure he passed away a few years ago. But a tremendous resource, always has great things out there.
Each was organized by the Project for a New American Citizen, a student activist group based at the University of Texas. Let's listen to some highlights from G. Edward Griffin's speech, which was entitled The Quigley Formula, a conspiratorial view of history by the conspirators themselves.
Now, I'm going to summarize the story that Carroll Quigley presented in his two books. I'm going to paraphrase it in my own words, and I'm going to be as careful as I can not to exaggerate or to leave anything out that's important. And then when I'm all done, I'm going to go back to Quigley himself and read excerpts to illustrate that I had not distorted what he had said. But it's spread over so many pages that you have to bring it together and condense it. And that's going to be my mission now. See if I can do that. And here's the story. It was at the end of the 19th century that a secret society was formed in England by Cecil Rhodes. Now, Cecil Rhodes is well known in history for being one of the wealthiest men in the world. He was the top political figure in South Africa toward the end of the 19th century. He had amassed a tremendous fortune because he had acquired control of the diamond mines and the mineral deposits, primarily the gold deposits in South Africa. He had a monopoly over them, personal monopoly. You can imagine the amount of wealth, untold. I don't think anybody ever knew what it was or could count it. It was very private wealth. But it was perhaps one of the greatest, if not the greatest, fortunes in the world, certainly ranking up there with that of Rothschild. What people don't know is that when Cecil Rhodes died, none of that vast fortune went to his heirs. It was all transmitted and used for the purpose of creating a secret society. And the purpose of the secret society, according to Cecil Rhodes' wills, and there were several of them, was to create an organization that would literally control the world from behind the scenes, using measures and strategies and tactics so that the rulers would never be seen. They would operate behind the scene. They would put forth political figures and commentators and frontmen who would be viewed by the population as the movers and shakers of society, but they really would be frontmen. They would be ruled from behind the scene.
Now, if that sounds familiar as something that I have said before to you, it's because that is how it works, guys. This is not, like, that was the problem with Trump. Literally. This is why the MSNs and the CIA and the entire establishment of the left, including people on the right, like the idiots on the Lincoln Project, who are not on the right, by the way. They're pretending to be on the right. But that is why they were like, "Wee, Orange Man!" Because Donald Trump wasn't a part of any of this. And that was so glaringly obvious. And the people that, of course, who were on the other side saying, well, but no, he was just a plant for the state and blah, blah, blah. They don't need that, guys. That's absurd. They do not need to do that. They do not need to pretend to give anyone hope. They have all the power. They are locking people up right now. They're going after, and they were doing it before under Obama. This is Biden's no different. He's just following Obama's policy of locking up people and going after them, going after their taxes, doing all kinds of things to silence people and to demonize them if they don't have the proper politics. What was I saying there? That You cannot believe that these policies are the same from Obama and the Bushes and the Clintons. They go all the way that far back, and yet that these people are independent actors. They're not. You know, we have videos of Dick Cheney talking about being in the Council of Foreign Relations, and he wouldn't tell his local constituents when he was running for office that he was part of the Council of Foreign Relations because they wouldn't like that. Like, wake up. Stop being children. Wake up. Start dealing with the hard realities of how these things work. Yes, Hari, deep state is real. Absolutely. And thanks for joining, by the way. Hey, guys. Another 30 minutes have passed. That means I have to ask you to like, share, and subscribe because that's kind of the rule I'm trying to keep here because I know people pop in and out and people forget and I'm not going to grow otherwise. So please do that. If you like this information, please like, share, and subscribe. If you like this video that I am playing, obviously I'm stopping it, talking, doing whatever, go find James Corbett, the Corbett Report, and give it a like over there because he does excellent work, and you should be subscribed to him if you want to know more about these things.
By the members of this secret society. And this was all outlined in 5 wills that Cecil Rhodes left. We know a little bit about one of those wills. It has made it into mainstream knowledge because it was used to create the Rhodes Scholarship. By the way, President Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar. Should not be a surprise to anyone. But the Rhodes Scholarships are known, and we think that just a means by which this benefactor, Cecil Rhodes, left a large amount of money so that worthy students could get a good education. And it turns out that's not it at all. The Rhodes Scholarship was designed to be more or less a recruiting and training arm of the secret society, to look for just those young men, originally young men, now including women, who had the right characteristics, the right mindset, right worldview, who would be recruited into this hierarchy and could be placed into important positions in the secret society. And we know about this because these wills have now been written about. I'll be quoting one of the men shortly. His name is William Stead. He was the executor of Cecil Rhodes' estate, and he wrote a book that it revealed a great deal of information about these otherwise secret wills. This organization not only was formed at the turn of the century or the end of the 19th century, but it still exists today, and in fact has been a major historical force in all world affairs since the end of World War I. Okay? The goal of this group originally was to export the British model, the British culture, the British Empire. Cecil felt that the British had the finest legal system, the finest language, the finest culture, the finest government in the world, and it was, he felt, their obligation, noblesse noblesse, to rule the world so that they could spread this wonderful culture to the rest of the world, so the ignorant masses of the world could benefit from what they had developed in England. That was his original concept, and he wanted to do it in such a way that there would be very little, if any, resentment on the parts of the populations around the world who were being benefited by this transfusion. And that's one of the reasons for the necessity of keeping everything secret. Now, that evolved very quickly after Cecil Rhodes' death. It became clear that they weren't going to quite accomplish the spread of the British Empire in that fashion. And by the time they took in their American partners from the United States, people like the Rockefellers and so forth, this goal rapidly changed away from spreading the British Empire, the British culture, to creating what they called a new world order.
All right. So you just heard it there, exactly what I've been saying from the beginning, that they recruited the Rockefellers. They recruited the Bushes as well. The Skull and Bone Society is part of this. There are many things that he talks about here. I will keep playing the video and stopping it. He's going to get into the concentric power rings and how they organize these things, and how that he took this directly from the ideas of Adam Weishaupt. Adam Weishaupt being the creator of the Illuminati, That was on May 1st of 1776, if I'm not mistaken, and that is why we have the date of May Day. But hey, I can double check myself real quick on that, but I'm pretty sure that's how that occurred. In any case, you're going to see how no matter how these organizations or societies exist, and again, you do your own research, you believe that they're influential or not. It's kind of telling to me that right now we have a Rhodes Scholar, Pete Buttigieg, in the Oval Office, not obviously as the president, but part of his staff and part of his administration. And we also have a Skull and Bones member, John Kerry, there, as well as a bunch of Council of Foreign Relations people there, including Joe Biden himself, who openly bragged at the Council of Foreign Relations that they basically, did a quid pro quo with the investigator of Burisma, and yet somehow Trump was the one who got in trouble for doing such a thing and did nothing of the sort. Again, he's going to explain this concentric power ring system really quick in a few minutes here. I rewatched this last night, I think, so hopefully it's fresh enough in my mind I can skip ahead a little bit if I need to. Let's see here. I got Matt in the chat saying, how do you consolidate the CIA, FBI, etc. offices of authority with Romans 13:1? Let every soul be subject unto higher powers, for there is no power but God, the powers that are ordained of God. Matt, that's what I call a proof text, though. So you can't take any text from the Bible out of context and use it as a proof text. You have to compare it to the totality of the Bible. We are supposed to honor all powers and authorities. We are not supposed to do evil things that powers and authorities suggest us to do. There is God first and the world second. See, I belong to no kingdom here. I honor the powers and authorities if they tell me to do something lawful. And I mean lawful, not like evil. I mean lawful from the Lord. If they tell me to do something lawful, then that is, that is acceptable. Let me, I'll actually do this real quick, real time. Maybe we can get to it before the end of the day. And if not, we'll do it tomorrow. But let me look up the martyrdom, and you guys are going to watch me spell terribly, of Polycarp. And you'll see how a individual from the first and second century, this happened during the second century, but you'll see how an individual who was an apostle, or not an apostle, a student of John the Apostle himself, right, treated a magistrate. Well, my mouse is being weird as it does. Here's a quote, just real quick. He says, 86 years I have served him, and he has done me no wrong. How can I blaspheme my king and my savior? And as that story goes, essentially, Polycarp did most of the things that the magistrate told him to do, but he wouldn't claim Caesar to be king, and he would not reject God. Those are things of legal standing. Also, understand this, Matt, the highest law in the land is the Constitution. No one is above the Constitution, including the federal government. It is a document stating specifically the powers of the federal government, but more than it's stating the powers, it's stating the powers that it has alone and the powers it doesn't have. We don't interpret it that way anymore. So again, if the government is evil in violating their law, then they're in the wrong. Again, if a comp tells you to do something, I'm not telling you to fight against him or go against him. For instance, another example is with the COOF here. Executive orders aren't legal orders. These kind of authorities, these kind of things aren't the same thing as honoring authority. Obviously, you should be paying your taxes. They're going to come after you if you don't. Do I think taxation is theft? Well, yeah, generally yes. Now, if you get an appropriate service back for that, that's a whole nother question. But let me see. There's been a couple things in the chat since you said that. Offices that meld with the deep state, which has no authority and does evil with them. Also worth a mention, the Boudin Club is the UK equivalent of Skull and Bones. Okay, good to know. I did know there was a UK branch. I was not aware of the name though. The Bowling Don Club. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. I'll probably look that up because I don't think I've ever heard the name directly. Blair, Bojo, and Cameron, they were all okay. Gotcha. True, trying to make you sin, you don't, and serve a higher power. That's right, and that's the thing, Matt. It's always right. Like there's always the simple argument, like, well, it was legal for the Nazis to do what they did in Germany. You have to choose if you serve the masters of this world or a higher power. You should respect authorities and not just, be blatantly a jerk to them, right? You shouldn't be looking for conflict with them. But there is a discernment that you must have of knowing when to walk away, knowing when to keep your mouth shut, because they're swine and you should not cast your pearls before them, or knowing when you do need to give a testimony, because there are times when you need to stand up and give your testimony. There are times when you need to stand up and say, no, sir. You just have to understand that you might be a martyr. You have to understand that you are taking on the burden of whatever the state may do to you. Now, for me, I'm willing to make that stand at the appropriate time if the Spirit, tells me to do such a thing. If I feel that in the moment, I'm going to do it. And in the end, every time I've done such a thing, I've come out on top. Now, I actually quit my last job because of this, basically. I had an authority tell me something that I didn't find morally right, and he was completely unethical in his actions. And so I quit my job, and I made a decision not to, which I kind of made before, but I was somewhat desperate because I hadn't worked in a while, and I needed to get the money in and pay my mortgage. So, but that again, that's because I was injured. But so I went back to former professions, and I was like, this isn't bad. To the last few months I was there, like, this is ridiculous. These people are micromanagers. This job isn't that hard. I don't have enough support here. They're doing everything wrong, and then here I do my job properly, and I get in trouble for it. Yeah, time for me to walk away. Let's see what else is in the chat here. I don't serve the officers of authority, but I respect them. Well, yeah, exactly. I'm going to have to go down this rabbit hole for sure in regards to my country and its ties. I mean, we only separated in the 80s, and the roots are deep. Yeah, Holly. And that's the thing is, I think most of your countrymen, being Canadians, being the nice, polite people that they generally are, and I like Canada, at least in the summertime. Never been in the winter, but I like Montreal, which is funny to say because they're a bunch of crazy socialists and communists up there. But no, I mean, Montreal's a cool city. And Toronto's not too bad either. I've never been out to BC and Vancouver and all that, but I hear it's great. I used to have a buddy in the Marine Corps that was from BC originally. But yeah, most Canadians, they don't even think about any of this stuff because you guys are just going about things as usual. And more or less, you guys started really in the 20th century. You started socialist because the Fabian socialists were so influential in the British government. And I think the only time that I'm really aware of that Canada's been really prosperous was in the last few years, not under Trudeau, but before Trudeau, with a conservative government. Because here in the States, especially when I was young, we used to always make fun of Canada's dollar being worth like, a third of the American dollar, of course. And there's no real reason for that. There isn't. And then when people in Canada talk about universal health care that think it's amazing, I'm like, I think you've never experienced free market healthcare. Of course, no one in the United States really has either living today, but a more free market healthcare system. Dahari, sorry that the storms are messing with it. Come back and watch me later, I guess. I don't know what to tell you. got to come to Alberta. Have a happy Star Wars Day. Well, maybe sometime. We can do some Muay Thai together, Holly. Although I'm rusty and I got a bad hip, and knees that I'm trying to rehab. But yeah, we can do some Muay Thai together.
Which was a world government ruled from behind the scenes by the secret society, but based on the model of collectivism. Now, the methods, very important to understand the method by which they hoped to accomplish this. Not to be done by guns, not to be done by invading armies. It was to be done through infiltration of the power centers of society. It to be done not by large numbers of people, but a very small group of people in the secret society who would consciously go into the power centers of society, move to the top, and lead the masses through the organizations to which they belong. The political parties, the government agencies, church organizations, labor unions, media centers, corporations, you name it. You know, people have a herd instinct. We move together. We flock together. We have leaders. We have opinion leaders. And the masses are always flocking around their leaders. And so Cecil Rhodes and his companions knew this, and they were very wise to choose a strategy which said, we don't need to control the masses one by one. All we need to do is capture control of the organizations of the masses. And in that fashion, we can lead with extremely small numbers behind the scene. That is the method by which they have been accomplishing their goal. Now, the structure, very interesting. This is where it really gets off the wall. The structure that they chose was modeled directly after Adam Weishaupt's Illuminati, of all things. Now, we're told today that the Illuminati doesn't exist. And I don't know whether it does or not. If it does, it may or may not have historical continuity back to the original, which was formed in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt. You know, it was supposedly disbanded in Bavaria a few years later. The Bavarian police raided the home of one of the high dignitaries of the Illuminati, and they captured all of the personal papers written by the dignitaries and by Adam Weishaupt. And these are now, I believe, in the London Museum or the London Library, the British Library. And so a researcher can go there and read these things, and I've read copies of them. And I was just amazed when I was reading through Cecil Rhodes' information to find out that Cecil Rhodes had copied the structure that Adam Weishaupt had created for his Illuminati. Now, does that mean there's a connection? No. It just means that obviously, I think it's obvious that Cecil Rhodes had read the same papers I did and said to himself, this is a good idea. But what is this structure? Weishaupt called it rings within rings within rings. And what he meant by that was that the people involved in this secret group were not to be aware that they were being directed by a smaller group, a smaller ring inside the outer ring. And he said that, for example, the leaders of the group should be the founder and maybe one or two of the brain trust. They would be at the hardcore center, perhaps the all-seeing eye, you might say. But around them, they would build a slightly larger group of people, of maybe 80 or 100 people or 200 people, who would think that they were the whole enchilada. They would not know that there were three running the show from the inside, and they were not supposed to know. Maybe eventually some of the more astute ones would be allowed to know that, and they might be recruited into the center, but most of them would not ever know in their whole lifetime. Then that group would create around itself another ring, much larger in number, perhaps several thousand people. And they would think that they were the whole show, too, not realizing that there were a smaller group on the inside controlling them. And finally, that larger ring would create another one which would reach out into mass organization with truly large numbers of people. And for sure, most of those people would never dream in their wildest imagination that their whole structure was being directed from rings within rings within rings. And that is exactly the formula that Cecil Rhodes chose.
All right, I'm going to leave that there, guys. Go watch the rest of this. There's a good another 20 minutes or more of this over on the Corbett Report. And of course, G. Edward Griffin can be found everywhere, all over the internet. And as Dahari mentioned, he part of the John Birch Society. As I mentioned in the beginning, John Birch Society was instrumental in fighting the commies back in the day. And still, there is a wealth of information about them, from them and their group, but not often talked about today. So again, I'm just going to leave that there because I'm not trying to play this whole video, but I wanted you to understand how these concentric rings work of power and how that's more or less how all these things operate. That we work in a system that has people out front that, we can yell and blame. Like do any of you really think? Do any of you truly believe that Maxine Waters can organize anything and get anything done? Like, when the Orange Man said low IQ Maxine, I happen to really happen to agree. She is a very simple person. Now, maybe she's a perfect representative for whoever she represents over in Compton and wherever else. But the reality is, guys, that woman is not a mastermind or planning anything. She is just someone who's out front enjoying the perks of saying stupid things like the rest of them. Go watch your videos about Build Back Better. Your little compilations out there. I've played them before. Everyone's saying build back better, build back better, build back better. And yet some of you believe that they're independent thinkers, that this is coming from them as individuals and not some top-down source. Now, granted, there is a bit of a zeitgeist out there, a word I like to use, the collective unconscious, if you believe in such a thing. There is a pattern of thinking that does tend to permeate the world because, well, we communicate with each other over vast distances these days and the internet and instantly, but as well as the princes and principalities of the air, the powers of the air that influence all of us, those things that whisper us and whisper to us in the ear, and they get us to do things. And most of us do them. We just ignore them. I've talked about before, my struggles with whatever sins I may have and mostly things I struggled with hardcore in the past, not like little things that come up in the day. But, if I have some sort of temptation, the first thing I'm doing, generally speaking, is praying to God to relieve me of that temptation. And most people don't consider doing that. They don't think about pulling themselves away and going, towards Christ. They go, oh man, I'm going to avoid that. I'm going to avoid, that girl. Maybe you're sexually involved with some girl that you shouldn't be or something, right? And you're like, I'm going to avoid that girl and she's bad and whatever for me. But then you start thinking about it and she starts messaging you and you message back and forth and you do it. How many times do you, when you're in that kind of situation, or do you sit down and go, oh, I got this text. I really, 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 really love being with this girl. The emotional pleasure that she gives me is so great that I want to be with her in this moment. But then everything else about her is just toxic. How many times do you go and get down on your knees and start praying? Probably very little. And some of you aren't religious. So again, that's fine, but, kind of my point there is that these are the things that need to be guiding us. And these are the things that we need to be looking toward instead of just other distractions or other things in the world. We need to be focused properly on what's going on. Every single one of you need to be out there educating yourself, which is why I bring these things up, because you're never going to not necessarily that you're going to win arguments with people, but you're never going to win people in to the side of liberty if you aren't able to tell them the realities of life and if they're going to play this game of let's vote for these officials who really aren't doing anything, they're just following the policies of unelected officials behind the scenes. So let's see here. Holly says, Maxine appears to be always living in her chaos feminine. Yep, hyper emotional, able to express well and drive it outwards to the crowd. A perfect tool to instigate and flare up groups. I agree 100% there, Holly. Let me check entropy real quick here. Entropy chat was being weird to me. I typed something. I was trying to say hi to my wife, and she was in the chat for a moment and didn't show up. So I got 3 messages in there saying hi to my wife. All right. So in any case, yeah, we need to be focused inward in ourselves and what we can do for others and stop asking of the society to change things. And part of that is finding our inner strength. For me, that's going to be in Christ. For you, it might be something different. And again, like I said, I'm not going to disparage you for that. That's fine. That's your choice. I'm actually not... I'm not a huge fan of proselytizing to people because I don't think that you can convince anyone of anything. I think people have to be convinced on their own terms. They have to convince themselves, if you would. So all I can do is present information and arguments and let God do the rest. Let him open your hearts to hear what I have to say. So with that, for the last half hour here that I'm going to be streaming, let's get back into some of George Washington's farewell address. Your father was a lifetime member of what? Out of context because of the delay. So, not a huge deal. Just saying. I don't get context because of delay. In any case, back to the George Washington farewell address, which it looks like. Oh, you know what? This did not come back to where I wanted it to. Okay, so we're down here somewhere. I'll find it real quick, guys. Yeah, we're about right here. So I'll pick up where I kind of finished off. It says, I have already intimated to you the danger of parties in the state, with particular reference to the founding of them on geographical discriminations. Let me now take a more comprehensive view and warn you in the most solemn manner against the baneful effects of the spirit of party generally. Maxine, your father was a lifetime member of Maxine? What? Or Maxine's a placeholder? I don't know. I don't know what you guys are in there in the chat talking about, but this spirit, unfortunately, is inseparable from our nature, having its roots in the strongest passions of the human mind. I've talked about this. Party politics or tribal politics, which is why you shouldn't engage in them. Being a tribalistic person, to my mind, means you're not individuated. And being individuated is important because that means that you cannot be possessed by the madness of crowds. The madness of crowds is something that is a horror upon humanity. People feel free to do things within crowds because there's an anonymity provided. There is a group, collective of responsibility. So instead of the individual taking on and looking in their soul and saying, I did something bad, they feel that disseminated amongst the group. This is all social science, folks. I will have Aiden Paladin on in a few weeks. I know some of you might have issues with her, but one of the things that she is really good at is the social science because it's what she did in academia for a long time. So I will have her on in a couple weeks because I want to talk about some of these issues. So y'all can think she's cringe or whatever. That's fine. Some of you might like her. Some of you might hate her. But regardless, she has a certain amount of knowledge, regardless if she is atheistic or anything else. So it says this exists under different shapes of all governments, more or less stifled, controlled, or repressed. But in those of popular form, it is seen in the greatest rankness and is truly their worst enemy. The alternative domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge. Again, I covered this yesterday, but just to reiterate, natural two-party dissensions, and we're seeing this spirit of revenge right now. Am I correct or not? Because I'm pretty sure that the Dems are very vengeful. In fact, they have been ever since we took away their slaves, as the joke goes, which in different ages and countries has perpetuated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightening despotism. But this leads at length to a more formal and permanent despotism. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline to minds of men to seek security and repose in those absolute power of individual. And sooner or later, the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns this disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruins of the public. As I said yesterday, a strong man comes about. I'm going to read this real quick. What Holly said is accurate. Figureheads like her have always kind of a regime connecting them and use them, what they're doing to Biden is cruel. Yeah. But Biden signed up for it, brother. Biden wants to have that power. This is why I don't feel completely bad about Biden. At first I sort of did, but then I see how he struts around and does whatever. Biden's like, yeah, I'm the man. Yeah, everyone, look at me, I'm the president. And I really think it has nothing to do with him but ego. I think Biden has some undeserving ego, and the only reason why he has any of the power that he has is because he's always just been a yes man for the powers that be. Look, guys, we know he's not a good guy. We know that he is a plagiarist. We know that there are Secret Service agents that have complained about him basically assaulting their wives and girlfriends. We know all about his son's antics. All this does not add up to make a great character. Now, if Biden had some horrible sins in his life and he repented and he said, I am no longer a part of this, I no longer do these things, and things seem more on the up and up, then sure, I would give him the benefit of the doubt, but that's not the case. That's not the case in any way, shape, or form. All right. So, without looking forward to an extremity of this kind, which nevertheless ought not to be entirely out of sight, the common and continual mischiefs of this spirit of party are sufficient to make it the interest and duty of a wise people to discourage and restrain it. Excuse me, guys. It serves always to distract the public councils and effable and public administration. It agitates the community with ill-founded jealousies and false alarms, kindles the animosity of one part against another, foments occasionally riot and insurrection. It opens the doors to foreign influence and corruption, which finds a facilitated access to the government itself through the channels of party passion. Thus, the policy and the will of one country are subjected to the policy and will of another. And again, I read that yesterday. Yep, Shelley, no honor amongst thieves. There is an opinion that parties in free countries are useful checks upon the administration of the government that serves to keep them alive the spirit of liberty. This, within certain limits, is probably true, and in governments of the monarchical caste, patriotism may look with indulgence, if not with favor, upon the spirit of party. But in those of the popular character in governments purely elective, it is a spirit not to be encouraged. From their natural tendencies, it is certain there will always be enough of that spirit for every solitary purpose. And there being constant danger of excess, the effort ought to be, by force of public opinion, to mitigate and assuage it. A fire not to be quenched, it demands a uniform vigilance to prevent it bursting into flames, lest instead of warming, it should consume. And again, he's talking about just having checks on the party system, which we do not. We have a ensconced two-party system right now in the United States, completely ensconced by law. Now, there are other parties. You can have parties, but they're essentially impractical to build up. It's not like in parliamentary systems where a party can rise up rather quickly. It doesn't work that way here. I'm a huge proponent of getting rid of parties, and then people are like, well, but then you might have to build coalitions, and that makes a worse thing, having a coalition government. And I'm like, maybe it does, but maybe we can be smarter and find some ways to essentially have none of those things, right? Not to have factions within the government. And I get it that we can align on issue, but that should be the way I would think of it, is we should align on issue. Oh, here's an issue that I agree with. This guy agrees with that. Let's get together. Tulsi Gabbard is a horrible leftist. Literally. Her policies are absurdly Sanders-like or worse. She is a terrible, terrible leftist. She is great on anti-war policies. I could see Rand Paul and Tulsi Gabbard getting together to write bills on war policy to get us out of these foreign wars. That is an issue that they can align on. We don't vote that way. What we vote for are party team systems. And so instead, what we have now, because of the party team system, we have big giant bills that might have something like that in there. Oh, let's talk a little anti-war policy. But the rest of the bill is about, lining the pockets of big business, bankers, industry, foreign aid, all these other things that just are not in the purview of the government, or at least they shouldn't be. They should not be at all. I think Dahari, you're really far behind. I see that you're saying that delay to Maxine Waters. Maybe you need to try and refresh. I don't know, man. I don't know what your deal is, because everyone else seems to be with me. But, you guys, as far as chats go, tend to be a lot more quiet than chats I tend to get on. Which means I must be compelling when I speak. I don't know what to say. I have no clue. In any case, let's continue. It is important, likewise, that the habit of thinking in a free country should inspire caution in those entrusted with its administration, to confine themselves with their respective constitutional spheres, avoiding the exercise of powers of one department to encroach upon another. So here he's talking about the separations of powers. We have not separated those powers, folks. Yes, Biden is a lifetime politician. Certainly do not feel sorry for him. He sold his soul a long time ago, folks. A long time ago. The spirit of encroachment tends to consolidate the powers of all the departments in one, and thus to create whatever the form of government. Actually, let me... I feel bad for Dahari for being behind. Because he's talking about stuff I was talking about, a while ago. In any case. Lost my spot. The spirit of encroachment tends to consolidate the powers of all the departments in one, and thus to create whatever the form of government, a real despotism, a just estimate of that love of power, and the proneness to abuse it. I guess the proneness is how you would pronounce that. That's a weird spelling, man. Which predominates in the human heart, is sufficient to satisfy us of the truth of this position, the necessity of reciprocal checks in the exercise of political power by dividing and distributing it into different depositories, and constituting each of the guardian of public will against invasion by the others, which doesn't happen. They go in and just, do as they wish. So, and they go and don't worry about the public. They only worry about their own careers within the government. Bastiat talked about this very clearly in his book, The Law. Perhaps I'll cover some of that tomorrow. That'd be actually pretty good. I do want to finish up with a farewell address. I do want to get all the way to the end. So let's see. Yeah, YouTube streams better for you. I mean, great, guys. Wherever you want to watch, Entropy is further ahead than YouTube. Wow. Well, I don't know what to tell you, guys, because they both started. This Entropy stream should have started after I started the YouTube stream because I'm running all this through OBS. But you guys will live. You'll live. So, let's see. To preserve them must be as necessary as to institute them. If, in the opinion of the people, the distribution of modification to the constitutional powers be in any particular wrong, let them be corrected by the amendment in which way the Constitution designates. I believe I read this again yesterday, so I actually was further up than I should have started, but whatever. Repeating myself is good. Repeating this is good. Teaching this is good. This, as I said yesterday, not being taught in our schools today is a failure of masculine leadership, or at least taught in our homes. But let there be no change by usurpation. For though this, in one instance, may be the instrument of good, it is the customary weapon by which free governments are destroyed. The precedent must always greatly overbalance and permanent evil any partial or transient benefit which the use can at any time yield. Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. Amen. You will not have good government without that. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism, who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. The mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them. A volume could not trace all their connections with private and public felicity. That's really, really interesting. A volume could not trace all their connections with private and public felicity, saying that if you wrote a book, a volume of a book, all the deeds that they did publicly and privately for the greater good of the community, you couldn't list. Does that sound like our society in any way, shape, or form today? I would say no, because most of us are just worried about us and getting on to the next day. Let it simply be asked, where is the security of property for reputation, for life, if the sense of religious obligation desert the oaths which are the instruments of investigation in courts of justice? And let us with caution indulge in the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on minds of particular structure, reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in the exclusion of religious principle. And I repeat, as I have repeated often, what do we see today? How is the world working today? He says, all the dispositions and habits which lead political prosperity, religion, and morality are indispensable supports. Our governments were based on religion originally, to some degree, here in the United States very specifically. And he says, in vain would a man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness. Yet this is what the left does. This is why they hate patriots. This is why they hate chauvinist. You know what the word chauvin means, right? Not Derek Chauvin, of course, but Chauvin of the Napoleonic fame. He was a great patriot, And he would not give up on Napoleon after his imprisonment and exile. So he began, or people began to use his last name, chauvinism, as extreme patriotism, because he had this patriotism for the love of France under the Napoleonic Empire. The left uses that as a derogatory term today. Chauvinism should actually be celebrated like patriotism. You want your homeland to do well. The left says that, but all they do is destroy things. If they wanted things to be well, they would build things. But, up is down and down is up in the world and the kingdom of Satan. The mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them. Absolutely. And I reread that Felicity and their connections being traced to volumes, private and public section there. Where's the security and prosperity for reputation for life, for a sense of religious obligation, deserted the oaths? Yeah. What we've seen is a secular humanist society that has no logos become infantilized, global homo, and gynocentric. All of these things are antithetical to biblical principles, and therefore we have a weak society on the verge of collapse. This is not just in the United States. It is in the entire world. The entire Western world that had these principles. Interestingly, nations that picked up Western ideologies, Western economic influences, they don't struggle with these things because they maintain their own identities and their own beliefs. This is why advanced Muslim nations, I should say, don't struggle with these issues. Part of that's the Muslim side of things, but those nations are actually quite secular. The ones that are really free, they're quite secular, but their laws are based in their scriptures. Or we could go over to the Asian influenced nations. And Asia has a deep root in its history and ancestors, and see that it has much of the same thing that the Muslims have, to the point where now China is kicking out the femboys. They're trying to promote masculinity. They're banning feminism on social media. And of course, they have a birth rate decline because they decided to basically have a one-child policy forever, and there were too many baby girls who were murdered and not enough born, and now they have too many men. And women, of course, biologically have a greater value. Tahari, I'm glad you're here with me in real time. Yeah, I think you were just really far behind, buddy. Let me see here real quick, the chat, before I keep going. Also, whatever happened to the Tara Reid rape allegation to Biden? Yeah, I mentioned that the other day somewhere. I couldn't recall her name. I probably mentioned it on here. I tend not to recall everything that I say because I say so much, and I've been streaming a lot lately. So I'm in two minds about entropy in this case. On the one hand, F YouTube. On the other hand, I like having an active chat on YouTube stream. Might be good, as the channel doesn't really have stream behind. I don't know. In any case, yeah, I'm basically, guys, entropy for me is if you guys want to talk about stuff that you don't feel like you should talk about on YouTube because you don't want to get me yeeted, much appreciated if you do it over there on entropy. Also, entropy is so you guys can donate if you feel so inclined to, because I'm not planning on monetizing on YouTube. One, they take too big of a cut. Two, they suppress creators. I don't really want to give them my money. And three, most importantly, that gives them too much power over me and what I can say and not say. And they already have enough not being monetized. So let's see. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on minds of particular structure, reason, and experience, both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in the exclusion of religious principles. And again, amen. And this is what we've seen happen in the United States and why it's been being destroyed. And we know exactly what happens when these things get torn away. Society just becomes ultra chaotic and ultra corrupt. We've seen this in every socialist communistic regime that has embraced humanism. It is subsequently true that virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government. The rule, indeed, extends with more or less force to every species of free government. Who that is a sincere friend to it can look with indifference upon attempts to shake the foundations of the fabric. Promote then, as an object of primary importance, the institutions for the general diffusion of knowledge. In proportion as the structures of government give these forces to public opinion, it is essential that public opinion should be enlightened. So what's he saying here? Well, we need an educated population. It's substantially true that the virtue in morality is a necessary spring of popular government, meaning if we have crap virtue and crap morality, we're going to have crap government. When people think that it's okay to allow teenagers to have knife fights, we're going to have a crap government. When they think it's okay for a man to stick his finger in a woman's private area, to sexually assault her, make her sniff it, smell it, and say another man was here, and then run off and then be shot by the police as they're trying to get a knife and paralyze the rest of their life, that was a good person. By the way, whose father is a just avid racist, like terribly promotes these horrible ideas, which I do not advocate, folks. He's into extermination of people, as far as I can tell. But yeah, that is a good person. We're gonna have a crappy government. You know, George Floyd, Saint Floyd, gonna have a crappy government. There's a problem here, and this is why the balkanization needs to happen, because these people, there is no bringing them into any sort of society that can agree. Our society is fractured. It has been long coming. It is here. We are fractured. We have to face the reality of this, and we have to do what is appropriate with it. And then he says, the rule indeed extends with more or less force to every species of free government. Who that is a sincere friend to it can look with indifference upon attempts to shake the foundations of the fabric. I mean, if you're a friend of liberty and sincere free government, how can you not see these things? How can you be indifferent to them? Promote then as an object of primary importance institutions for the general diffusion of knowledge. Important. Are we promoting institutions that diffuse knowledge? Do you believe that social media groups like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube right now is technically social media? I am on it. I'm on DLive and Entropy as well. But is this diffusing knowledge appropriately? Or are we being censored? The institutions, friends, are censoring, and we know this. In proportion as a structure of government gives force to public opinion, it is essential that public opinion should be enlightened. Now, when he says give force here, he doesn't mean like by the point of a gun. He means, give it some steam, right? Prop it up a little bit. But again, when he's talking about institutions, the Americas didn't have standing institutions. This is a big thing de Tocqueville talks about as well. The institutions weren't highly established. The primary institution and the first institution that they have gone after here in the Western world, aside from the government directly, right? Because that institution had to be taken over first in order to have the top-down control to dope up the masses with the re-education. But the first thing that happened was they got rid of the institution of masculinity, of male leadership, of male and female distinctions and roles. And they started to prop up independence of female, which is actually I'm okay with. But then it became a point of jealousy and despair, and that women must be like men in order to be fully developed beings. And actually what that has done, of course, is created just more mental illness and upside down society, and a lot of men who are still little boys. Of course, we talk about this all the time, but I'm not going to elaborate on that too much. more because we talk about it all the time. So, guys, I'm going to jump off here in a minute. I think I'm going to read this last paragraph or two, but I don't want to go much over 2 hours. So let's read a few things here in the chat. This is, okay, that's better. Channel doesn't have streaming behind it. It's growth yet. Yeah, this channel for sure, because I just started streaming, last Wednesday or Thursday? I don't even remember now. I think it was last Wednesday. What I was attempting to say before was my father was a lifetime member of the John Birch Society. Oh, okay. Yeah. They've done great work. Entropy is also working on a native live streaming. So the more you donate over there, the closer we are to that. Then Susan, yeah, there you go. Thank you, Dollhawk. Yes, go donate on Entropy so Entropy can become a thing, because supposedly Entropy is majorly about free speech, and they might be the only people that actually are. Now, eventually someone might go after them, but I'm hoping that they just stand their ground, because after the insurrection, after such incidents happen, DLive cocked really, really hard. And all of a sudden, they were the right wing. This is where all the right wing racists go. Okay. Gotta go. Don's talking to Tommy. Yeah, I heard that Don was, so I will jump off here. I know a lot of you will get over there, and I'll be in that chat here in a bit. Anyways, never mind. I got an hour. Oh, okay. Well, never mind too, but I probably won't be on for much more than another 10 minutes, guys. So just stick with me here. We are definitely being censored for sure. Dude, I can't even tell you about how my counts go up and down. I should have at least 300 plus subs right now. It does not go up because every time I gain subscribers, YouTube likes to take those same subscribers away from me. Only you guys that come and visit me regularly basically stay in. And I would actually suggest that you make sure that you are subscribed, but if I'm showing up, you should be. The legal system is weakening men. Absolutely. All right, now that I'm caught up there, let's make sure Entropy's caught up real quick. If there's any chat over there. What happened? Get Bigley. Okay. Values need to come from within, not from daddy government. Yes, as Christ said, the kingdom of heaven is within. And that doesn't mean that you find God within yourself, but what it means is that you do need to look inward where you are at, and God needs to dwell in you in order to live a moral life. Now, again, I would give the devil his due and say perhaps you can live a moral life without God. In fact, I think there's some scripture that could back that up. But you're going to have a much better life with God and in God. And you also, I don't think you're going to get that an eternal reward of eternal salvation. And again, whether you believe in that or not, that's up to you. But even if everything I said was not true, I'm going to live my life like it is, because I think it is a better mode of operation to live my life for the world. So anyways, let's read another paragraph or two before I get out of here. As a very important source of strength and security, cherish public credit. We haven't done that at all, guys. Public credit is, ooh, doggy. That is why we are all debt slaves, right? One method of preserving it is to use it sparingly as possible, avoiding occasions of expense by cultivating peace. Yep, because war is a way to place ourselves in debt. But remember also that timely disbursements to prepare for danger frequently prevent much greater disbursements to repel it. Avoiding likewise the accumulation of debt, not only by shunning occasions of expense, but by vigorous exertion in time of peace to discharge the debts which unavoidable wars may have occasioned, but not ungenerously thrown upon prosperity, the burden which we ourselves ought to bear. You know what? I think that is a good place to stop it because he's getting on a different topic. Let's look at the debt real quick, though. Let's look at the debt. Remind us how we've not listened to George Washington's words. Sorry. Typing in debt slaves Should be typing in debt clock. Oh, I put in debate. Sorry, guys. National debt clock. Real time. Let's see here. Humble thyself in the sight of the Lord. Pathologically so. Shelley, social justice warrior professor, shut down her students' live stream. Yeah, I saw that. Trust the gunman rather than call the filthy cops to put it away. Yeah, she did, Shelley. She was arguing with this kid, and he was like, basically all cops are bad. And he's like, oh, no, I don't think so. Da-da-da-da-da. And she's like, let me tell you, little boy. Let me tell you how it is. It's disgusting. And this is why I have sympathy for MGTOW guys, although I think that they're completely, utterly wrong. But, yeah, these women today are out of control. They've got daddy issues. And, look, there's just a lack of male leadership. Everybody has daddy issues. I'll put it that way. Practically everybody has daddy issues. All right, here's our U.S. national debt. Let's bigly this even more, actually. That is nearly $30 trillion of national debt. That is $84,000 per citizen, nearly $85,000, and the debt per taxpayer is $225,000. And it just keeps going up. In fact, it's going to go up significantly in the next few years as we have just hyperinflated our economy. We haven't seen the fallout of that yet. Just stick around, guys. Just wait a few months. I'm going to throw out that by this time next year, you're not going to be doing so much traveling because gas is going to be up another $2. Milk is going to be, well, it depends on where you live, but I don't buy milk very often. So, but I'm going to say milk's going to be $4 or $5 easily. Everything's going to get more expensive. This is all part of the plan to get travel shut down. It's all part of the plan to price people out, right? Those of us who are talking about getting land to getting out there and doing things. It's going to be harder to do as the debt bubbles go up, and they are going up. The housing bubble is rising again. I recently looked at my home and its value, and I can tell you right now, guys, that it is insane. It is absolutely insane that it is worth what it is today, because I've been here, I think, 7 years, and I've gained $50,000 of appreciation on my home, and it's not a big house. Now, I didn't know that this area that I live in, my neighborhood, and whatever else was going to have a lot of benefits in that appreciation, but still, absolutely, kind of shocking to me. So, hyperinflation may be coming soon. Well, no. Hyperinflation is coming. Not maybe. Let me get out of here with some scripture, because I do want to do that. And I want to bring up the letter of James to the diaspora of the Jews, that is, those Jews who were living outside of Israel. And there was a period of time, if you guys don't know this historically, where the Jews were actually kicked out of Rome, too, for a short period. And when they returned, the book of Romans that Paul wrote is addressing the Jews who returned to the Roman Gentile church and their conflict with the Roman Gentiles. That context is quite important to understand, or you're going to miss a lot of things about how these scriptures are. So let's just start from the beginning here. I'm not going to read a ton of this, but just a little bit, because there are some things I want you to understand. Greetings to the 12 tribes. James, a bondservant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ. To the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad greetings. Now, depending on what denomination you are in, if you are Eastern Orthodox or Catholic, you might not think James was the brother of Jesus. I hold and contend to the idea that James was the oldest brother, that is the second brother of Jesus. He was the leader of the Church of Jerusalem. This is how things worked. I believe he was born of Mary Magdalene. I don't think that Mary, the mother of Jesus, I don't think that Mary remained a virgin her entire life. That would not have existed within the Jewish tradition, folks. That is a pagan idea that I think that the Greek and Roman people brought into the church. You may believe what you wish. I'm just telling you what I think. There were early church writers who did write about the importance of Mary, but most of them were later 2nd and 3rd century writers. It wasn't that important in the early 2nd century. It's also not that important in the scriptures. In fact, the last thing we hear from Mary in the scriptures are that Jesus tells John to take her and to watch after her. Most likely because John seemed to be the youngest of the apostles. And he's also historically known as the one who lived until his old age. He was never martyred. So just to throw that out there so you guys know where I'm coming from. It's a kind of a typical Protestant style view. It's beyond that, though, because we have to understand the scriptures within the cultural context of the day. And no Jewish man was going to live and raise a family with a woman who he was never going to have sex with, because the marriage would not have been consummated. It would not have been a legitimate marriage. Now, was she a virgin when she had Jesus? Yes. That was part of the issue. So you guys can argue amongst yourselves. You don't have to believe what I have to tell you on that. Whatever. Let's get into what James had to say. I should also make a note that James was considered so holy that Josephus thought that his murder at the temple was why Jerusalem was destroyed. Of course, Josephus wasn't aware of Jesus' predictions of the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. But in any case, it says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the test of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask God, who gives you all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him." Sorry, guys, just want to bring up my chat real quick. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of sea driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is double-minded, unstable in all of his ways. So these people are not resolute in their resolve or in their faith or commitment to the Lord. They are lukewarm, as the church of Laodicea is described within the book of Revelations. Perspectives of the rich and poor. Let the lowly brother glory in his exaltation, but let the rich in his humiliation, because of a flower of the fields he will pass away. For no sooner than the sun has risen with a burning heat than it withers the grass. Its flower falls, and its beautiful appearance perishes. So the rich man will also fade away in his pursuit. Blessed is the man who endures temptation, for when he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who loved him. Let no one say he is tempted. I am tempted by the Lord, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desire and enticed. Then, when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from his Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. Of his own will he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. So then, my beloved brethren, Let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. For the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Therefore, lay aside all filthiness and overflow of wickedness, and receive with weakness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. But be doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For anyone who is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man observing his natural face in the mirror. For he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. But he who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this one will be blessed in what he does. If any among you thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this one's religion is useless. Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their trouble, and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. So that was the first chapter of James. And I'm going to kind of break some of this down real quick. And I want to bring up here Matthew chapter 5, because what you're going to see is that the Beatitudes, things said in the Beatitudes and things said on the Sermon on the Mount. I read you guys all of this yesterday. Not the full Sermon on the Mount. Murder beginning in the heart, adultery, all these things, right? And then in chapter 6, it goes on to talk about these things as well. That is chapter 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew. And most people don't realize that James is speaking to the lessons on the Sermon on the Mount, because the Sermon on the Mount provides all of the basics that you need for Christianity. And so when he talks about being in various trials, you have to understand that this world that we live in, many Christians don't understand, is going to be hard for us. And so you have to understand that our path is not easy. Christ said, count the cost, and that no man would count the cost to build a great tower and not have all the building materials, or that no man who was a general would not count the cost of going to war when not being prepared enough to have enough men. Count the cost of following Christ. Know what it is, and know that trials are part of your life. But have patience, and let that patience be a work. Now, this is a contentious thing amongst Christians. I think it's a silly argument. In fact, in our birthing class, the guy brought it up last night about the idea of once saved, always saved, which I don't agree with. I think you can reject God. It's in his own word. But sometimes these are semantical arguments that we're talking past each other. But if anything, folks, again, I say you have to take these passages in the entirety of the text of the Bible. And that's what I'm trying to present to you here. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. How many of you think that? I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I don't know these things, I don't understand. Do you sit down and pray to your Father in the name of Christ Jesus for wisdom? Do you ask for endurance? Do you ask for patience? Do you ask for him to calm your spirit? But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord, meaning be of a single mind, have your faith, and let it not be shaken, folks. And I get it. That is not an easy thing. And many of you, if you have shaken faith, perhaps you have not received the Holy Spirit. And that's a whole nother question that we can talk about and get into sometime. But I just want to remind you, perhaps that has not happened to you. That should be a guarantee, a seal to your life, but it does not happen to all who come into the faith immediately. So that should be understood. Remember that the apostles had to pray for quite a while for the day of Pentecost to happen. Let the lowly brother glory in his exaltation, but the rich in his humiliation, because as a flower of the field he will pass away. That is a direct inference to the Sermon on the Mount. See how the lilies of the field rise? They neither reap nor toil, yet they're God's glory. The birds of the air, they don't gather, things, yet they're happy. How much more important are you to our Father? For no sooner has the sun arisen with a burning heat than it withers the grass. And so beauty appears and perishes. This told me... Interesting. I just got a message from OBS saying that I was cut out. It doesn't look like the stream was interrupted, though. It does not look like it to me. It says I'm still streaming. All right, let's get through this, guys. It says, blessed is the man who endures temptation. For when he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life. Now he's talking about temptation, not just in the moment, but temptation throughout your life, right? This is an endurance race. We have a life to endure it, to follow the Lord and to bear fruit. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by the Lord. No, you're tempted by yourself or Satan, and the Lord gives you relief. And he says it exactly as this. This is why I brought this up earlier. That sin is conceived and then it is birthed, right? You get that desire in your head. Maybe you get the desire to look at some pornography or something. You're alone. You're all by yourself. Maybe you had a beer or two or whatever it is. You're relaxed. You see a pretty girl and you, and you're not even thinking about it, but you're supposed to be in the kingdom. Start praying to God. Go into the Word. Fight it. Do not let the evil one win. Is these everyday little things, folks, that build your character. It's when you do things properly that other folks who aren't looking that build your character. Pretending out there amongst, those who have eyes on you, amongst the masses, amongst the community. Pretending to be a good person is not being a good person. You must do it when no one sees. Do not be deceived. Every good gift, and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father. He brought us forth by the word of truth that we might be kinds of first fruits of his creation, or of his creatures. And this is an important concept, that we are part of the first fruits. The early church was part of the first fruits. We all are. We're all part of the first fruits. That is Christ's death, the resurrection, and what that means for us, that God has adopted us into his kingdom. So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath, for wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. And this is just repeated over in the scriptures by many authors, that people who fly off the handle and yell and scream are just, who are basically just jerks. They are not inheriting the kingdom. Be doers, not hearers only. There's a quote by Paul that Martin Luther hated, or not Paul, sorry, James, that Martin Luther hated. You show me your faith, and I'll show you my works by my faith. Or I'll show you my faith by my works. Yeah. You show me your works. What was it? Oh, I could just find it's the next one. But it's quite famous, right? He hated it because it seems to contradict the idea of faith and faith alone. It does not. What you don't understand, what many people don't understand, is that the concept of faith and faith alone was not an early church concept. Faith meant you acted. It meant you did something. It wasn't an empty word. It wasn't, I can say all day that I have, that I'm a virgin, but this is not true. Saying it does not make it so. I can say I'm a born again virgin until I guess I have sex again. That obviously is not true. That does not make it so. We can say we are all kinds of things. It does not make it so. We know this on a basic level when we start talking about certain individuals who believe that they're all kinds of things they are not, right? Are you a male or a female? Well, that's the only two things you can be, but some people think that they're furries. I don't know, guys. This is no different than people going around in the faith saying, I believe, therefore I'm good. No, to be in a relationship with someone means that there are applications and rules that apply. There is commitment. There are things that you must do. You need to go back, and sometime I will, but you need to go back through all the parables that Christ gave and all the warnings of people who would be within the kingdom, but not actually obtain the kingdom because they did not do the basic prerequisites of maintaining that appropriate relationship and giving just dues to their master. And if anyone among you is religious and does not bridle his tongue but deceives his own heart, this one's religion is useless. Pure and undefiled religion before God and in the faith is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. Meaning, stop doing sinful things, stop making a sinful example of yourself, and help out those who cannot help themselves out. This is from, again, James, Christ's brother. Whether you think it was his cousin or whatever else, I guarantee you he grew up with him, spent his life with him, did many a things as a younger to Christ, and knew after the resurrection what he was. James the Just, as he was known, was so holy that it was said that he had pads of extra skin, basically calluses, over his shins and knees because he prayed so much. That Josephus, the Jewish historian, believed that when the Sanhedrin threw him off the temple and then clubbed him or broke a rock over his head, whatever it was, that finally killed him, that Jerusalem was destroyed nearly immediately afterwards. And the siege of Jerusalem, which was horrible, by the way, where young children were hunted down to be eaten because people were starving to death. That's the kind of stuff that happened, folks. Absolute horror. That when James died, that God punished the Jewish people because of that. James, a very holy man, and this is just the beginning of his book, his letter to the diaspora of Jews around the world. So, with that, guys, let's see. My mom asked for patience and ended up with 3 more kids. Be careful what you ask for. That's a good point, buddy, because I kept asking for God to kick me in the butt, and boy, did he ever. But also, my life is so much better because of it, and because I accepted it, because I listened, because I decided to do the things, even though they were hard things, like, quit my job, work, doing things that make less money, get rid of insurance, all those safety nets. So let me rearrange some things here. I'm going to read some chat. We'll get out of here, guys. I said if I cut off, let's see. Thank you for reminding me the power of prayer for spiritual calm and discernment and perseverance. I'm just saying, you get what you ask for, but for the unexpected ways, always with God. Because what you're asking for when it comes to God is what you want, usually. Which is why you should be praying and saying, Father, and James goes over this, by the way. You should be saying, Father, not my will, but your will be done. Whatever you want of me. Ask God what he wants of you and be committed to doing it. And I promise you, he will give you every desire in your heart. Forgive me if I tear up because it's rare that I can tell this, that I don't, but I have a really hard time personally just not having female companionship in my life. I just always have, more or less. I've always had female friends or a girlfriend, or, I was married previously. And so I didn't have any for a long time. But I did have my daughter, and my daughter and I were very close. But more than anything, I wanted someone to just know me for me without projecting their nonsense onto me and whatever else. Now, we all project our nonsense onto everybody. Don't get me wrong. But I remember I was taking a break from schoolwork. I was praying. I was reading some religious literature, and I ended up reading one chapter of Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. And it had more or less just come out at the time. And I had read this chapter particularly, and he talks about the Sermon on the Mount and other things that are very important to me. And I realized that I had my eye on the wrong focus. There's a portion in the Sermon on the Mount where Christ says that the eye is the lamp of the soul, and the idiom has something to do with this. It's something like, whatever you're looking at, your light is shining on, whatever you're focusing on, that is what you're going to see. And the idiom goes something like, the lamp is the light of your soul, but how much more dark is your soul if that is the light of your eye, or something like that. Saying, I think, meaning specifically that you look at dark things, you're focusing on dark things all the time. That's actually what your soul is about, is what you're focusing on. And for me, I was focusing on the wrong thing. I was focusing on not understanding that I had my daughter knew me, and I needed some sort of different companion. It didn't matter if she understood me completely or in depth, or just took me for who I am. None of that mattered. And when I realized that I needed something different, I gave all that up. I gave it up to God. I prayed about it. I had instant relief. And 3 days later, I met my wife. And literally, we've been together. We've been an item since day one. Aside from my first wife, this is the longest relationship I've been in. Aside, again, from my first wife, which was a terrible relationship. So, I'm very grateful for that. I've made a lot of changes in my life, though. Have I not faltered? Of course I have. Of course I am imperfect. Of course I've had to ask for forgiveness. Of course I've gone down the wrong path for many weeks and started going the wrong way and realized I had to turn around and change directions. This is what happens, folks. Because unless you are walking side by side with Christ 24/7, which is what you need to be doing, but unless you're doing that, it's going to be difficult to maintain that position, and the evils of the world will come into your life eventually. So, all right. I said I was going to get out of here, and here I am running my mouth. So, as unexpected way. Yeah, Shelly asked for direct change, and I was ready for it. I got pregnant in my third. Okay, so you guys are kind of doing some in-house talking. Well, guys, that's all I got. All I got for today. We went 2.5 hours today. I didn't mean to do all that, but hey, I could probably stream for 8 hours straight. It would not be a problem. So I appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for coming in. Let me make sure I don't have anything on entropy before I get out of here. I don't see anything. Let me refresh entropy in case it's being weird on me again. No, I do not see it. So, guys, love you all. Appreciate you being here. I will be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. And, of course, I will also be over at the Ends Justify the Memes at 7 p.m. That is Eastern on both accounts. And we will have Sniper over there tomorrow. Some of you know who he is. Some of you don't. But whatever, you'll figure it out. So, guys, appreciate you watching. This has been All Minus One. My name is Bill.